The last time you felt that ache in your skull, the one that makes your eyes pulse and your brain feel too heavy for your bones. You reached for a bottle. You twisted the cap, shook out a small white tablet, and swallowed it with a gulp of water. You didn't think about the factory that made the pill, or the chemists who designed its molecule, or the clinical trials that proved its dose. You just trusted that in 20 minutes, the pressure would fade, and your world would click back into its normal, painless shape. That trust is a luxury so profound, you've probably never even called it a luxury. It's just the background hum of being alive now. A fever means children's Tylenol. A cut means antibiotic ointment and a clean bandage. A strange pain means a doctor's appointment, a scan, a prescription. The entire architecture of your survival, from the moment you wake up to the moment you sleep, is buttressed by this invisible, miraculous shield. You are, in a very literal sense, surrounded by medicine. But for 99.9% of human history, that shield did not exist. Not a single bottle, not one syringe. No antiseptic, no anesthetic, no antibiotic. No ibuprofen to blunt inflammation, no insulin to regulate sugar, no inhaler to open constricted lungs. For over 200,000 years, your ancestors faced a world bristling with biological threats, with nothing but their own bodies, their own wits, and the crushing weight of trial and error. A simple splinter could bloom into a killing fever. A stomachache could be a death sentence. A childhood disease could erase an entire family line. The baseline condition of life was profound, relentless vulnerability. And yet, you are here. Against impossible odds, your direct lineage survived. Every single one of your ancestors, for thousands of generations, navigated this gauntlet of microbes, injuries, and failures of the flesh, without a single modern tool to help them. They did not just barely cling to life. They thrived, they multiplied, they spread across continents. They did it so well that we now number in the billions. How? If the medicine cabinet was empty, what exactly was in their survival kit? The obvious answers feel tragically insufficient. They were tougher? Maybe, but a tough immune system can't stop a ruptured appendix. They ate natural foods? That doesn't cure sepsis from a lion bite. They just died young? That's a statistical truth, but it doesn't explain the survival of the children, your great-grandparents 1,000 times over, who had to live long enough to have children of their own. A high infant mortality rate is a brutal filter, but it's not a strategy. So what was? To understand, you have to strip away not just the pills, but the entire modern mindset that comes with them. You have to step into a world where health wasn't a personal possession to be managed, but a precarious, fleeting state of truce, with an environment that wanted you dead. Their survival wasn't about curing disease in the way we think of it. It was about something far more fundamental and far more strange. It was about never getting sick in the first place. And the first, most critical piece of their strategy wasn't something they did. It was something they were. Your body right now, as you read this, is carrying out a silent, ancient protocol that began long before you were born. It starts with your skin. Run your finger along your forearm. That surface, which you might think of as just a boundary, is a fortress. It's slightly acidic, secreting substances that make it a hostile desert for most invading bacteria. Every hair follicle is a guarded gate. When you sweat, you're not just cooling down. You're releasing dermcidin, a natural antibiotic peptide that slices through bacterial cell walls. You are, by default, walking around in a suit of biological armor. But that's just the outermost wall. The real masterpiece is the system that activates the moment that wall is breached. Let's say you get a cut. Immediately, cells called platelets rush to form a clot, a physical plug. But then comes the subtle, ancient intelligence. The area around the cut becomes inflamed. It gets red, hot, swollen. We think of inflammation as a problem, something to suppress with that ice pack or pill. But for 99.9% of human history, inflammation was the cure. The heat makes it harder for bacteria to multiply. The swelling brings in a flood of plasma and white blood cells, the cellular cavalry. Those white blood cells don't just attack blindly. Some of them literally engulf the invaders, digest them, and then present pieces of them, like grisly trophies, to other cells to study and remember for next time. This is your innate immune system. It's not a learned defense. It's a pre-programmed, ancient inheritance shared with most complex life. It's your body's first, furious response to a breach. And for most of human history, it was the only frontline medicine there was. Its success rate determined everything. But it's a blunt instrument. It can't specialize. It can't remember a specific enemy forever. And it can fail catastrophically. So how did your ancestors tip the scales? They couldn't improve the software. That was baked in by evolution. But they could do something extraordinary. They could radically change the environment in which that software had to operate. Think of your immune system as a standing army. A modern army in a sterile, peaceful city might grow lazy, unprepared, even prone to overreacting to minor threats. But an army that is constantly engaged in small, manageable skirmishes against known local bandits, that army stays sharp, calibrated, and strong. This is the core, counterintuitive twist to our entire story. The ancient strategy for survival wasn't about avoiding germs. It was, in a way, about cultivating them carefully, constantly. From before you took your first breath, it starts with how you were born. In a modern hospital, the goal is a sterile field. But in the ancient world, birth was a microbial baptism. A baby born vaginally is coated in its mother's microbiota, a specific mix of bacteria from the birth canal. This isn't contamination, it's inoculation. These first microbes become the founding population of the baby's own gut and skin biome, training the newborn immune system to recognize friend from foe. A baby born by cesarean section, without this exposure, gets a different, often less optimal starter set, often dominated by skin bacteria from the doctors and the environment. This ancient, messy transfer was the first and most important vaccination your ancestors ever received. It set the tone for a lifetime of immune function. Then came the food. Not just what food, but how it was prepared. Before agriculture, before pantries, every meal was an exercise in microbial management. Meat would spoil in hours. Tubers could be toxic. Grains, if they existed in the diet at all, were tough and difficult to digest. The solution wasn't just cooking, though fire was a monumental shield, but fermentation, controlled spoilage. Your ancestors didn't just eat natural food. They actively predigested it using bacteria and yeast. They made yogurt, cheese, fermented grains, pickled vegetables, fermented fish. Every bite of these foods was a dose of probiotics, introducing vast armies of beneficial bacteria into the gut. These microbes didn't just help digest food. They crowded out dangerous pathogens, produced vitamins like B12 and K, and constantly conversed with the immune system, teaching it tolerance and keeping it intelligently alert. This is why the concept of clean and dirty flips on its head when you look through an ancient lens. A child playing in the soil, putting hands in their mouth, sharing food with the family dog, was not being exposed to dirt in our dangerous sense. They were being exposed to the local microbial ecosystem. They were downloading the regional antigen database. Their immune system was sampling thousands of low-level threats, building a vast library of recognition, and learning not to overreact to harmless pollen or food proteins. Their world was a constant, low-grade immune training camp. But this only works if the threats remain low-grade. And this is where the second, more brutal pillar of ancient survival comes in: population structure. Your ancient ancestors did not live in cities of millions. They lived in small, nomadic bands of maybe 25 to 150 individuals. This was a devastatingly effective form of quarantine, imposed by the very logic of hunting and gathering. In a small band, infectious diseases that rely on quick, dense transmission, like measles, smallpox, or influenza, burn through the population and then have nowhere to go. They hit hard, kill the vulnerable, and then vanish, because there aren't enough new, susceptible hosts to keep the chain alive. The survivors, now immune, could move on. These diseases couldn't become the endemic, childhood rite of passage killers they later became in agricultural societies. They were tragic, episodic lightning strikes, not constant background radiation. This small group life also created a different kind of health network. Everyone's microbiome was similar. Everyone was exposed to the same environmental microbes. There was no such thing as a novel pathogen jumping from a distant, isolated population, because contact between groups was rare and cautious. The microbial world was stable, known, and local. Your immune system was essentially being trained for the exact same set of enemies your parents and grandparents had faced. It was a tailored defense for a specific world. And yet, injuries still happened. Infections still took hold. Fevers still raged. When the body's first lines of defense failed, what then? There was no emergency room, no surgery. This is where the story moves from prevention into the murky, profound realm of what we might call the first medicine. things done to the body in an attempt to alter its course. And this is where archaeology reveals something that shatters our assumptions of primitivism. We used to think of ancient healing as pure superstition, chants, herbs of unknown effect, and desperate rituals. But the more we look, the more we see a deep, observational wisdom, encoded in practices that persisted for millennia. They weren't working with molecules, but they were masterful naturalists, conducting a 200,000-year-long clinical trial by survival. Take fever. We fight it. We see a rising temperature as the problem itself. But your ancestors, through brutal experience, may have understood it differently. A fever, after all, is the body's own evolved strategy. It makes the internal environment hostile to pathogens, which are often more sensitive to heat than our own cells. There's evidence from historical and ethnographic records that many cultures didn't try to aggressively lower fevers. They sometimes even encouraged them. With sweat lodges or hot baths, they were, in a sense, collaborating with the body's own defense, not overriding it. Then there is the matter of plants. This is not about natural medicine in the modern, supplement aisle sense. This is about a staggering depth of trial and error knowledge. The use of willow bark for pain, a source of salicylic acid, the precursor to aspirin, is famous, but it goes far deeper. The fungus Penicillium molds were known to some ancient cultures for treating infected wounds. Certain clays rich in minerals were used to settle upset stomachs. We now know some of these clays can bind to toxins. Honey, used for millennia on wounds, is now recognized as a potent antibacterial agent due to its high sugar content, low pH, and the presence of hydrogen peroxide. But here's the crucial point. They didn't know about acids or antibacterial properties. What they had was a generational database of observation. They saw that when a poultice of this specific mold was applied to a wound, it festered less. They saw that tea from this particular bark reduced aching. They didn't know the mechanism, but they rigorously tracked the outcome, and they paired this with something else. Intense, focused care. In a small band, a sick person was not isolated in a room. They were the center of the group's energy. Food was brought to them. Water was fetched. Bodies were kept clean. Warmth was maintained. This social buffering, this reduction of stress and expenditure of calories for the sick, is itself a powerful therapeutic. Stress hormones like cortisol suppress the immune system. Removing that stress, providing security and calories, allowed the body's own defenses to work at their peak. Medicine wasn't just a substance. It was a circle of people. All of this, the microbial training, the small group quarantine, the collaborative management of symptoms, the social care, formed a coherent, if unspoken, system. It was a system that worked well enough for humanity to conquer the planet. But it had a catastrophic weakness. It was a local system for a local world. And that world was about to end forever. The invention of agriculture and the rise of settled cities didn't just change what we ate. It detonated a bomb in the middle of this ancient health protocol. For the first time, humans lived in dense, permanent crowds of thousands, right next to their own waste and their domesticated animals. The stable, local microbial garden became a chaotic, seething soup. Novel pathogens jumped from animals to humans in these crowded markets and pens. Diseases that once burned out in small bands now found endless fuel in the city's constant supply of new babies and susceptible adults. They became endemic, childhood killers. This is when medicine, as a desperate, specialized craft, had to begin to evolve in earnest, to fight the new monsters that our own success had created. But that's the second half of the story. Because to truly grasp the miracle of your existence, we have to look at the most extreme test case of all. We have to ask what happened when all the systems failed, when infection took hold, when bones shattered, when pain was unbearable. What did your ancestors do when the body itself was breaking? The answer lies not in herbs or poultices, but in marks left on bone and stone. Evidence of interventions so bold and precise that for decades, archaeologists refused to believe they were possible. And those marks tell a story that changes everything. For a long time, the official history of medicine said serious surgery, the deliberate, skilled cutting into the human body, was only a few thousand years old, a product of civilized societies with metal tools and written texts. The idea that someone in the Paleolithic, with a stone tool, could or would perform an invasive procedure was dismissed as fantasy. The risk of infection alone seemed to make it a death sentence. Then, they found the holes, not random holes, perfectly round, or oval, holes drilled into human skulls. Trephinations, found on skeletons from the Neolithic back into the Mesolithic and, stunningly, the Upper Paleolithic. One of the oldest known, from a site in France, is on a woman who lived roughly 7,000 years ago. The bone around the hole shows clear, smooth signs of healing. She survived the operation. For months, maybe years. This wasn't an injury. It was a calculated intervention. But the how is almost secondary to the why. Why would anyone do this? The leading theory is that these operations were performed for reasons we would now call neurological or psychological. Severe headaches, seizures, perhaps trauma from a blow to the head. They saw a problem they believed was inside the bone, and they devised a method to access it. They used sharpened flint or obsidian to scrape and drill, likely over multiple sessions. They would have had to navigate not just bone, but the membrane beneath, the dura mater, without puncturing it and causing fatal bleeding or infection. Somehow, often enough to make it a repeated practice across continents, they succeeded. And it gets more profound. Archaeologists have found skeletons with healed fractures that were perfectly set, broken arm bones realigned so well they healed straight and strong. They've found evidence of dental work, teeth with cavities that were drilled out, possibly with a bow-driven flint drill 9,000 years ago in Pakistan. They've even found prosthetic toes, crafted from wood and leather, on Egyptian mummies, showing not just surgery, but a commitment to restoring function. This isn't just first aid. This is a will to intervene at the deepest level. It's a declaration that a life was worth an unimaginable gamble, worth days of agonizing procedure, worth the collective knowledge and effort of the group. It shatters the last vestige of the primitive myth. Your ancestors weren't just passive victims of their biology, waiting to see who lived and who died. They were active, ingenious engineers of their own survival. They observed, they hypothesized, they experimented, and they remembered. They built a scaffold of knowledge, one part microbial management, one part social care, one part bold intervention, that held humanity aloft long enough for the modern world to be conceived. So let's land this back where we started. Back in your body, right now. That trust you have in the little white pill, it's not the opposite of their struggle. It is the direct, final product of it. Every clinical trial, every sterile syringe, every MRI machine is the endpoint of a chain of survival that demanded this much ingenuity, just to see the next sunrise. The modern medicine that surrounds you is not a separate entity from the ancient world. It is that ancient world, refined. The antibiotic is a hyper-concentrated version of the mold in the poultice. The vaccine is a precise, safe simulation of the microbial baptism of birth. The surgery is the trephination, performed with light instead of flint. We didn't leave their world behind. We built a cathedral inside it, which means the most haunting question isn't, how did they survive without medicine? It's the mirror image. What have we, with all our medicine, accidentally survived without? We have survived without the constant microbial conversation that trained our immune systems for millennia. We've swapped the dirt of the forest floor for the sterile laminate of the office floor. We've traded the diverse, fermented diet of a forager for the processed, uniform diet of a global supply chain. We've replaced the small, stable band with the sprawling, shifting metropolis. And in doing so, we have created a new kind of vulnerability. The rise of autoimmune diseases, where the immune system attacks the body it should protect. The explosion of allergies, where it overreacts to harmless pollen or peanuts. The mysterious imbalances in our gut biomes, linked to everything from mood to metabolism. These aren't just random modern plagues. Many researchers see them, fundamentally, as diseases of absence. An immune system that was built for a world of constant, low-level negotiation is now living in a state of strange, sanitized peace. It's like that standing army in the sterile city, bored, twitchy, and prone to turning on the citizens it guards or launching full-scale invasions over minor diplomatic incidents. This is the quiet gut punch of our story. Your survival is a double miracle. First, that you are the heir to an unbroken chain of people who mastered an invisible world with nothing but observation and courage. And second, that you are living in the narrow, shimmering moment after that mastery, but before we fully understand the cost of leaving its conditions behind. So the next time you twist the cap off that pill bottle, let the moment hold two truths. Feel the profound relief, the privilege of that simple trust, but also feel the ghost of that older, deeper strategy. It's still there, in you. It's in the way your skin still acidifies to ward off invaders. It's in the fever you try to suppress, which is still, at its core, an ancient weapon you inherited. It's in the deep, social ache you feel when you're sick and just want someone to bring you soup. That's the echo of the circle of care. The understanding that medicine was always something done for you, not just to you. You are not a fragile modern creature, saved from a brutal past by technology. You are the living repository of that brutal, brilliant past. Every one of your ancestors was, in their own way, a physician. They diagnosed with their eyes, treated with the environment, and operated with stone. Their medicine cabinet was the world, and their clinical trial lasted 200,000 years. You are the final, stunning data point that proved it worked. The pill in your hand is a wonder, but the greater wonder is that you ever needed it at all. So when you feel that next headache coming on, and your hand reaches almost automatically for the relief on the shelf, pause for just a second. Feel the weight of the bottle in your palm. That is not just a container of chemistry. It is an echo across 200,000 years. It is the final, polished link in a chain of survival, forged by people who used the world itself as their pharmacy and their operating room. They are not ghosts in a distant past. Their legacy is the very fact that you can read these words without fever clouding your vision, without an infected wound burning up your blood. Their success is the reason. Your biggest health concern today might be a tension headache from staring at a screen, and not a tooth abscess that could poison your entire body. You are living inside the future they fought for with every observed symptom, every carefully applied poultice, every agonizingly slow scrape of flint on bone. This changes everything about how you see your own fragility. That anxiety you feel when you get sick? That's not weakness. It's an ancient, deeply calibrated alarm system. Your ancestors needed that hypervigilance, the subtle dread that made them rest at the first sign of chills, that made them care for each other with fierce attention. You inherited that alarm. You just hear it now in the quiet of a modern apartment, where its urgency can feel out of place. And that is the final, quiet revelation. The goal of all our medicine, the pills, the scans, the vaccines, was never to erase our biological inheritance. It was to honor it, to create the conditions where the ancient, brilliant system inside you could do its work without being constantly overwhelmed. We built the sterile field, so your skin's acidity could be enough. We invented the antibiotic, so your inflammatory cavalry wouldn't have to fight a doomed last stand. We didn't replace your ancestors' medicine. We bought it the time and space to succeed. So the real story of medicine isn't a march from ignorance to knowledge. It's a conversation, spanning millennia, between the environment and the body. Your ancestors started that conversation by learning to listen. We continue it now by learning to intervene. But the subject has never changed. How to keep the miraculous, temporary project of a human life going for one more day. Which means the pill you take today is more than a chemical. It's a word in that long, ongoing sentence. It's a testament to the fact that you belong to a lineage of the most stubborn, observant, and caring physicians who ever lived. They are the reason you are here, and you, by simply living the life their struggle made possible, are the reason their story continues. The quiet gut punch is this. You don't just benefit from ancient medicine. You are, in this very moment, living proof of its success. The greatest testament to their 200,000-year clinical trial isn't a textbook or a museum display. It's your own breath, moving in and out, in a world they could never have imagined, but somehow built for you all the same.